In this lesson, we'll learn how to automate movement with Espresso. There's certain movements that animators should not be concerned with, and that would be the spinning of our fan blades. They shouldn't have to manually go in and spin them. Instead, we can design a much more sophisticated control that would allow them to rotate based off of time, and then we can give animators control over the speed of the spin. So that's what we'll work on. Let's go ahead and get started by heading over to our animation control, and we'll just add to our existing Espresso editor or Espresso tag. Alright, so at this point what we'll do is go ahead and add in our spin channel. So selecting our animation control, we'll find the spin, and we'll go ahead and add that port. Alright, great. So now what we need to do is go ahead and find our fans. So I'll go ahead and start with the left side. I'll choose View, scroll to First Active. Here's our first set of fan blades. Let's go and expand the right group, and we'll grab the second set, and now we'll go ahead and drag and drop them into our X group. Alright, from there we can go ahead and increase the size of both just so they're easier to work with. I'll also go ahead and drag them down just a little bit more. And then the next step would be to decide what axis they need to be controlled by. And that's going to be the heading axis. We can take a closer look at that by simply selecting just one of the fan blades and going to the heading axis. Alright, so once we know that for sure, we can go ahead and drag and drop these into the import side. So I'll go ahead and grab the heading axis of one. You'll see that we're not able to add the heading axis to the node that this doesn't correlate to. So you can see if we were to go ahead and drag it to the node underneath, now it accepts this heading axis. So it's nice that the system's smart enough to know what axis needs to be added where. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing now for the right fan blade. Simply go ahead and grab that object and go ahead and add its heading axis. Great. If you would like clarity, because right now they're both named the same, so what you could always do is either rename the objects here, or you do have the option of renaming your port by simply right-clicking and choosing Rename. So you have that choice. Didn't want to point that out to you. Alright, so how are we going to have these controlled by time? Let's figure that out first. Well, what's great is that within Espresso we have a time operator. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at that. If we were to go ahead and right-click, we can choose New Node, Espresso, General, and you'll see the time node here, closer to the bottom of this menu. So using time, what we could then do is now plug this into the heading axis of both. And what this is doing is it's looking at our current document settings to figure out the time that it needs to input. Currently, our document is set to 30 frames per second. We could take a closer look at that by using Control D to grab our project document. Here you can see 30 frames per second. So what that means is by the time we get to frame 30, this will equal a value of 1. Alright, beautiful. So let's go ahead and see what this does. If we were to minimize the Espresso editor and hit play, you can see we're starting to get spinning automatically, which is really exciting. So now we need to figure out how we can go ahead and tie these into our user data. We can use a formula operator for that. So with the formula operator, we're able to add a simple equation that we can use to again have the spin channel tie into the heading axes of both objects, of both fan blades, but then we could have the time influence the fan blade rotation as well. So let's take a quick look at this. I'll simply right-click again in empty space and choose New Node, Espresso, and this time we'll want to choose a math node, or excuse me, a formula node under Calculate. So let's go ahead and find that. Alright, once it's been added, let's go ahead and add a little bit more space here, and we'll go ahead and add the formula node in between. And I'll zoom in. Alright, so what we need to do is go to the import side, and we'll need to add two value ports. So what we need to wire in here will be 1, our spin, we can add that to value 1. And then we'll also need to add time, and we can add that to value 2. All right, great. So next, what we need to do is go ahead and add the output of the formula node into the heading axes. So let's go ahead and do that. There's 1, and there's 2. All right, so let's go ahead and examine the formula node. Now, since we have 2 ports here, what we could do is either use port names, which would allow us to use value 1 and value 2 into our expression we're about to create, or with this off, we can go ahead and work with variables to get the same effect. So if we wanted a variable for port 1, it would simply be $1. And then for port 2, it would simply be $2, so on and so forth. What we need to do is multiply the spin here by our time, and that is what will be output into our heading axes. So let's go ahead and type in as follows. That's going to be $1 multiplied by $2, again port 1 and port 2. And now if we were to go ahead and take a look at what this does for us, we'll hit play and we should see no movement at all because our spin channel is set to 0. Watch what happens if we set this to, let's say, 60%. Now when we hit play, we're going to get that amount of spin. But right now it's still kind of moving a little too slow. What happens when we set this to 100%? I bet it's still going to move slow. All right, we need them to move a little bit faster if this aircraft is going to fly. So this is going to be really simple. All we need to do is go ahead and add to our formula. So let's go ahead and concatenate our current formula. We'll just put it in parentheses so that Cinema 4D will read this first. And then following this, we'll go ahead and multiply by 5. So we have just increased this result by 5. So now when we go ahead and run this, let's take a look. I'll go ahead and minimize the Espresso editor and hit play. So now you'll see a much faster fan spin. Much better. If we were to go to our control and again set the spin to 0, you'll notice that there is no spin at all. Really exciting. So again, we have now control over how fast the fan should spin. Great. So in this lesson, we've learned how to work with a few really cool operators, the time operator to drive movement based off of time, as well as the formula operator to kind of change that effect to get exactly what we need. All right, well, in the next lesson, what we're going to do is use this same technique to rig the antenna.